The Monsters Ring, Chapter 5, Eddie's Revenge. Now, class, if a vampire is 3 quarts on deposit at the blood bank and he takes out 1.5 pints, how many cups are left? Russell smiled. For a 5th grade teacher, Miss Snurgle wasn't that bad. In fact, the whole week had been all right, considering how it had all started. Sure, Henry, the beast Raschnitz, had been keeping a close eye on him, but Russell had been his usual quiet self ever since the cafeteria incident, so that was no problem. And he had actually gotten the feeling from Miss Schnurgle that she was pleased that he had stood up to Eddie. As for Eddie himself, he seemed to be avoiding Russell. Had he been put off by the tough talk outside the cafeteria doors, whatever the reason, Russell enjoyed the freedom from fear while it lasted. But the best thing about the week was that Halloween was now so close. With its delicious spookiness, the sense of magic in the air, All Hallows Eve was Russell's favorite holiday. Better even than Christmas. Of course, its arrival meant he did have to deal with his mother's usual reaction to anything involving lots of sweets. Eat all that sugar, Russell, and you'll have so many holes in your mouth you could pump air through that and play Hail Columbia on your teeth. But he was used to that. Besides, for him, Halloween wasn't candy, it was mystery. Mystery and a strange tingle and dreams of ghosts and witches. And this year, a perfect opportunity to use his new ring. Friday, the day of class party, arrived at last. In the morning, Russell carefully packed a grocery sack with some old clothes he had snatched from the rag bag. Then he put his books on top of them so nobody would see his costume. Finally, he slipped the ring into his pocket and glanced over the instruction sheet to make sure that he had the chance firmly in mind. Then he hurried downstairs and slipped into his spot at the breakfast table. "What's that, Russell?" asked his mother, pointing at the bag. "Just some stuff," he shrugged. She pursed her lips. "So you're going to wear a costume." Sherlock Mother strikes again, thought Russell. "Now, Marge," said his father, "I wore a costume when I was in 5th grade. Halloween was a big thing for us. I'm glad Russell is going to dress up. There's a lot to be said for Halloween. Good for the imagination. It encourages kids to let their minds wander in fresh fields for a while. It even makes me stop to think. Didn't you ever wonder what else might be in this world we live in? What hidden marvels we might be missing? Do we know all there is to know? Well, I hardly think so." Russell listened in astonishment as Mr. Cronaker rambled on and on. He could not remember the last time his father had actually contradicted his mother. Usually, they just talked about completely different things. Finishing his breakfast, he pushed himself away from the table. His mother started to say something, but was overwhelmed by the flow of his father's words. Russell paused at the door and glanced back at the table. His father was still talking, and he winked at him. Suddenly, Russell understood what was happening. His father was making this entire speech just to keep his mother off his back. Well, he wanted to run back and hug him. He started back toward the table, but his father made a little gesture with his hand indicating that Russell should get out while the getting was good. A minute later, he was on his bike heading for school and feeling wonderful. This was going to be the greatest Halloween party of his life. "Going someplace, Cronaker?" Russell looked up, and his pleasant dreams came crashing down around him. Eddie was standing in front of him. His bike was drawn across the sidewalk, blocking Russell's path. Russell looked around for help. There was none in sight. No one to stop Eddie from turning him into pulp. There he is. Eddie grinned. "I owe you one, Cronaker." He let his bike fall, and then he took a step toward Russell. Russell fumbled for the ring. He pulled it from his pocket, started to put it on. Whack! Eddie knocked the ring right out of his hand. "Hey!" cried Russell, diving for it. "Come here, twerp!" yelled Eddie. He leaped after Russell. Just as Russell reached the ring, Eddie landed on top of him with a crashing thump. Russell's fingers knocked against the ring. It skittered over the curb and into the gutter. "Get off me, you rotten bully!" screamed Russell. Eddie laughed. "So you're not as tough as you thought, huh, Kraneker?" Then he mashed Russell's face right into the grass. "Leave me alone," cried Russell, but all that came out was, "Leave me alone." Frustrated, he began to kick wildly. He felt his right foot connect with Eddie's back. "Oh, you want to play rough, do you?" Screamed Eddie. He smashed Russell a good one, knocking the breath completely out of him. Then he climbed off. "Remember that next time you're thinking of calling me a bozo, Kraneker." Wiping his hands in satisfaction, Eddie hopped on his bike and rode off. Russell rolled over and sat up. Eddie was gone, and the golden morning went with him. All that remained was a burning sense of humiliation and a fierce anger that raged in Russell's heart. He beat his fists against the ground. He wanted to go after Eddie, drag him off that bike, and pound his ugly face in. But he wouldn't because, well, he was afraid. Finally, Russell crawled to the edge of the gutter, hoping desperately that the ring was still there, hadn't fallen into some unreachable place. He couldn't spot it at first, and began to fear it had just mysteriously disappeared. But at the last moment, he noticed a bit of green sticking out of a small puddle. He was at the upper edge of the monster's carved stone. He picked up the ring, dried it on his shirt, then he put it in his pocket. Then he began to sob. When the pain had diminished, he picked himself up and pedaled home to get ready for school. all over again. Russell's mother fussed over him as his wounds had been made by bullets instead of fists. "Why does this boy beat up on you anyway, Russell?" she asked, and she was driving him to school. Russell shrugged. "He hates me." "Well, why does he hate you?" "He hates everyone, I guess." "Well, that's too bad. Why don't you try to make friends with him?" Russell looked at his mother in astonishment. She had to be kidding. Make friends with Eddie? He'd kill me, Ma. "I don't think so, Russell. The next time he wants to fight, just stick out your hand and say, 'Let's be friends.' You might be surprised at what happens." "Yeah, big surprise. He turns me into applesauce." But Russell thought about his mother's words throughout the morning. One thing was certain. It would take as much guts to shake hands with Eddie as it would to punch him. Russell didn't think he could do it. Anyway, he wasn't at all sure he wanted to make friends with someone who had just about killed him a few hours before. Russell's anger simmered within him through the day, and it was a long day. The hours seemed to drag. All he could think about was the party and using the ring once more. At last it was time to put on the costumes. Miss Schnurgle sent those kids who had a lot of changing to do out of the room. Jack and Jimmy went with Russell to the big bathroom down the hall. Jimmy had decided against being a pimple. He was dressing up like Broccoli instead. He said he was the most frightening thing he could ever think of. While Jack and Jimmy were putting on their costumes, Russell went into one of the toilet stalls. He slipped out the school clothes, then donned the ragged shirt and the trousers he had brought. Next, he put on a pair of dirty, worn-down work boots that used to belong to his cousin Sidney. When everything was in place, he took out the ring and slipped it onto his finger. He stared at it for a moment, wondering who had made it. The monster on top seemed to be looking back at him. Suddenly, Russell was more eager than ever to be a monster himself. His thoughts went back to that morning. Immediately, his anger at Eddie welled up again. With it came an aching urge for revenge. He made his decision. Taking firm hold of the ring, Russell chanted the verse from the instruction sheet. As he did, he turned the ring twice.